we all have to be grateful for anyone in our lives who encouraged us at times when we needed to be encouraged. I lucked out because I met Margaret Atwood when I was a 17-year-old kid at Camp White Pine. She was the nature girl and I was the arts and crafts instructor. But we immediately gravitated to each other and shared ideas about the creative life. And one of my favorite answers she ever gave me was, I think we were sitting down by the dock in the sunset up at camp, and I said to her, do you think you have to suffer in order to be a great artist? And she looked at me and she said, I tried suffering and I didn't like it. Well, first of all, in the 70s and the 80s, I was a Polaroid nut, so I got into this habit almost obsessively of anybody who walked through my door. I would sit them down at my kitchen table because I happened to have a terrific overhead light that when the person sat at that table at that particular moment, it had a kind of a Caravaggio look to it or a Rembrandt. There was something about that particular light. There was a glow that really made the people who sat close to it look terrific. I don't know, I knew nothing about lighting, but it just was the right moment. It worked. I do have an ability to get people smiling, to get people to relax. I like to schmooze. I like to tell them a little bit about what I'm up to, or just share an intimacy or a confidence or whatever, get people feeling comfortable. And that's what would happen. In many ways, portraits like that are my gift to people for caring for me. It's my way to give back. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Allison asked me if she could tattoo one of my moose onto her arm for her 50th birthday. And there it is. There it is. Get ready for the next one. Are you ready? The Queen of Canada. I had to do that. Look at that.
That's great. That was something.
Folks, you're welcome to sit down and take whoever you want to sit beside with you. I didn't do place cards. I just wanted you to be happy to find your meal mates. Chef Junaid is ready. This is and this has been an incredibly adaptive year for me because I kept calling me from Guelph. It was online. And he said,
when I grew up, this was Little Belfast, a rather mean-spirited town. I once explained to Margaret Atwood she had no idea what it was like to grow up being Catholic in this town, let alone Jewish. Her response to that was to invite me to Massey College. Those of us who lived back then remember that the two main department stores were actually the social centers of this city. You know, my mother and father would meet at the statue of Timothy Eaton. I think of that. The guy was a dry goods salesman, and he was the iconic figure. And on Sunday, they had their showcase windows, you know, and they had curtains, blinds, which were lowered so that you could not be tempted to even contemplate the pleasures of life on a Sunday as you stood waiting for one of those old streetcars, freezing to death in the middle of the winter. It was a city, I used to say, of 2.5-story dreams.
I grew up in North Toronto. We were the only Jewish family on a WASP street. I came home at age 6 saying, how come we don't have pictures of baby Jesus up on the wall like all the other kids? My mother would say to my dad, Harry, say something, you tell him. Like we were Woody Allen, we weren't religious, you know? My sister married a Presbyterian high school teacher. Most of my nephews and nieces have married Christian kids, but we did grow up in a very North Toronto Anglican neighborhood. My parents were kibitzers. They loved dressing up on Saturday night and acting silly with their friends. It was Lucy and Ricky and Fred and Ethel. That's what people did. They put mops on their head, chocolate wrappers on their teeth, and danced around, made themselves silly and got drunk. But that's what people did. They got together and had fun and enjoyed each other's company. But we're all so busy in this city now, it's a different life. The whole culture of dinner table companionship and of creating and sharing great food and all that stuff is a lot rarer now, it seems to me, than it once was.
We've submitted the first 20,000 words, I think, and we're supposed to be 90,000. You were on lunch with them the other day.
I'm an immigrant to this country. I came here in the 60s. I was in Ottawa during the flag debate. I was at Carleton University. And then 10 years later, you did the flag. And suddenly, click, there was the flag. I became a Liberal because of Prime Minister Trudeau, and then you did a picture of Trudeau. So wherever I went, you kept following me. You were in my... No, it's true. This is true. I came to Toronto just before Expo 67. And at that time, the buzz in Toronto was about the new City Hall. In the 70s, you couldn't drink on Sunday, of course, and the food was really mainly roast beef and gravy. And it was not fun. And really within 5 years, I don't know whether it was Expo that did it, but everything started changing. Now when I look at my children, they think Indian food, Chinese food, Japanese, they think it's all Canadian food.
I was born on Palmerston. And they moved up to Chudley Avenue in the middle of the war in 1944 or 5. And I was named Charles Stewart. The idea being that in order to succeed, you had to, there was nothing called multiculturalism. You went with the majority group, and in those years it was Anglican WASPs from North Toronto. My mother, she had 2 voices. One, when we were at home and we're having dinner and we didn't finish our supper, she'd go, "You're rotten and selfish, there are children starving in Europe, finish your dinner." The phone rings. "Hello?" "Oh, hello, Reverend Jones. Oh, it's just grand to hear from you then." "Oh, well, yes, we'd be happy to come to the meeting." "Okay then, bye-bye." Click. "And another thing, finish your dinner." You know, like, that was the difference in the 2 worlds.
Do me a favor.
I remember you because I rented the loft from you. Back in those days, Charlie had bought this little building behind the hardware store. Me and Paul rented the top floor of that little 3-story building down that lane. And I think that's probably
Yeah, we got to know
you.
each other.
I would walk along Queen Street and I'd see this grotty old place there. And I always remember that on the menu were onion sandwich, 30 cents. I thought, we can do better than that.
The street had tumbleweeds blowing down. It was full of old retired World War II. And then Peter Pan was the first restaurant on Queen. That was before the
I mean,
revolution.
76 to now, how many years is that? That's a hell of a lot of years to be running the same restaurant.
Yeah.
And you know what I love about it is it's still, she hasn't changed the inside. Even I can remember nailing the nails into the upholstery on those bench seats
Yeah.
and getting the guy to make the little lamps, and they're all still
And just
there.
like
The 70s, and I really remember this, is when Michael Ondaatje came to Toronto, Rohinton Mistry came to Toronto, M.J. Vasanji came in late 78, Adipa Mehta came here in the 70s, dancers, Sudha Kandwani and her sister Menaka Thakur. So all these people who came in the 70s, they didn't really come into our consciousness until about 15 years later, because that's when their work started to being done. So by the end of the 80s, they had started becoming famous, and now, of course, they're famous all over the world. through the arts, I think people make connection, people make friends, and people see the world. And I think Torontonians were exposed to it. And I just love it when difference becomes normal and celebrated and enjoyed. And because how much more exciting is it?
You know the expression, ars longa, vita brevis, art endures, life is short. There are these magical moments that you have to cherish. Portraits are legacies. I've done 3 or 4 portraits over the last 30 years that I think are somewhat benchmarks or landmarks of my own life. One of the most important ones I did, I was 44 or 5. I actually put in my will that I'd like to have that one shown at my memorial. I was in my prime, I was feeling confident, I was beginning to understand that who I was and what I was a gift that I should be grateful for. Don't let the bastards go and make you crazy. How do you nurture self-esteem? How do you deal with your demons? I have some pretty bleak ones. I have some very powerful ones from when I was in my 20s. And some of the curators think that's my most important work. They look like these sort of, heads exploding off the page, like my brain is just going crazy. And they're expressionist, powerful pieces that really do invite introspection for everybody.
Charlie is something which I have never seen repeated, and I think it's extraordinary. He did 2 portraits that fit into a corner like this, okay? So on one side is me, and I'm looking across the triangle of the corner, and the other one is of Moses looking out.
At the world.
So he's created, out of this 2-dimensional, he created a 3rd dimension. I've never seen that before. And I found it very interesting, first that I'm looking at Moses and he's looking out. But that's another.
You were living at Chestnut Park, and all of a sudden your old red van drove up, and this huge 12-foot thing came out, went up this central staircase, and Robert said to me, "Dear, I thought it was going to be a drawing." And it turned out in this magnificent painting. And even to this day, as we look at it with William, is this very visionary white-haired man. He was before his time, looking out in the distance, looking at something very special. Me, you did very wrong. Because you couldn't quite capture who I was. Even though, my dear friend, we go back so many years.
Well, I was doing jazz at the Cameron very casually, and it's quite a thing when he booked me at the Imperial Room because I could see it from the Cameron. I could see the vibe of the history of the Imperial. I was pretty stressed out, and I get this call from this guy because he wants to paint me. And I kind of knew him. I was kind of afraid of him, but I knew who he was. Queen Street guy. He's the first guy to own a club on Queen Street, and Peter Pan, and Sandy, and the Fiesta, and it's just a great, fantastic scene to grow up in.
The beautiful thing about Charlie over the years, taking all of those portraits, in one way they are people who are frozen in time, but on the other hand, you can look at them in the same way that you can look at stories, short stories, because you can read stories into those portraits. Those are personalities.
Well, I got into the habit of taping the Polaroids onto my kitchen wall. And it was this huge kind of collage of all these people. And often when I had guests, people say, "My God, how did you get all these people at your kitchen table?" portrait, to be successful, has to be timeless. It really has to exude the essence of the person. It's not about whether they have hair coming out of their ears or whether, you know what I mean? So you have to really make decisions as to what matters. I'll let you in on a secret. The trick for a portrait, absolutely above everything, is the eyes. The eyes are the mirror of the soul. You get the eyes right, the nose comes next, the mouth comes after that, but the eyes are everything.